The next generation of AgTech IoT sensors use a number of new connectivity technologies to enable low-power, long-range connectivity. Now, many of you will be familiar with long-range cellular technologies such as 2G, 3G, 4G, and maybe even 5G. However, new terms such as LoRaWAN and Cat-M1 NB-IoT may be less familiar. This new breed of IoT technologies are designed to connect battery-powered sensor devices over long distances so they can operate in remote areas. With that being said, there are still plenty of key factors to consider before taking action, and lucky for you, we've condensed these factors down to the most applicable when thinking about IoT connectivity options for your operation. Firstly, your persona and digital transformation goals. So if you're more of an explorer looking to deploy one or two key sensors, we suggest it's best to just see what coverage is already available on your property. You can't go too far wrong with that. If, however, you're considering progressing towards a smart farm deployment, it's really hard to beat the performance, features, and coverage control available from setting up your own on-farm IoT network. We've touched on the personas within this space in depth in another video, which I'll also link below, so make sure you check that one out as well. Secondly, existing IoT coverage and signal strength. So if you already have LoRaWAN and/or NB-IoT coverage on your property, this is great news, as it's likely the right IoT sensors can jump online. The main thing to check here is the quality of your coverage, that is, the actual signal strength where you'll be deploying devices. So there are three main things to consider in relation to signal strength, which are obstructions between the device and the IoT gateway, which can be vertical, such as hills, lateral, such as large buildings, and cumulative. So these are things such as layers of vegetation. The next thing is distance from the IoT gateway. So even with perfect line of sight to an IoT gateway, it's possible to only get 1 to 2% of the original signal strength at 20-kilometer distance versus being a few kilometers away. So this doesn't mean your sensors won't connect, but it might mean an increase in packet loss and connectivity variability based on rain events. The third thing is how important the device data is. So for example, it might be fine to miss a few dam level readings if a device is on the fringe of reception. However, controlling a pump requires a rock solid link, so you don't want to get into trouble. Now, another thing to keep in mind is to look for IoT devices that have the option for adding a high gain antenna to enable operation in these fringe environments. The third thing to consider is latency and reporting frequency. Latency is the delay between when a device sends data and when you receive it. For IoT satellite applications, this can be up to 4 to 6 hours, whereas terrestrial-based networks are often within seconds or even minutes. So this can rule out some applications. Reporting frequency is how often a sensor sends its data. So often this is backed off to beyond what is technically possible, purely to extend battery life, as each shot from a sensor costs power. So we find 10 to 15 minutes and hourly reporting schedules are most popular, and both LoRaWAN, NB-IoT, and on-farm networks all support this. Fourthly, bandwidth and sensor support. So sensors such as soil moisture probes and weather stations produce a relatively large amount of data that is beyond the capability of IoT satellite options. This means if you're looking to deploy these kind of sensors, it's likely you'll need a ground-based solution over a satellite one. The fifth thing is downlinks and control capability. So a lot of IoT sensors only send data from a sensor. A downlink is when you want to send data to remotely reconfigure it or control something like a pump, irrigation system, or a gate. So if you're looking for remote reconfigurability or control, this is also where a ground-based solution over a satellite would apply. Next is power efficiency and sensor battery life, which is a very important one. So apart from battery capacity and quality, power efficiency is key for achieving ultra-long in-field battery life. This is where LoRaWAN will often have an advantage over NB-IoT, and both LoRaWAN and NB-IoT have a significant advantage over satellite. Next is static versus roaming devices. So for devices that will roam off farm, for example for tracking assets or monitoring supply chain, This is where a different cellular technology called LTE-M and satellite IoT services will likely be most appropriate. So static sensors such as probes and tanks don't usually move off-farm, so this is really only a consideration for IoT devices that are monitoring trucks and/or other mobile assets. So now let's discuss open versus closed networks. Open networks are those that enable different users and devices to connect to the same gateway. For example, one IoT gateway can be shared by multiple properties and devices from different vendors. The easiest way to think about this is to consider a mobile phone tower. On the other hand, closed networks are those where the owner can shut down access to other people and has the option to control which devices connect to their base station. The easiest way to think about this is to consider your Wi-Fi network at home. So you can elect to share it with anyone without a password, or you can put a password on it so you can control who has access to it. Being closed is a bit of a misnomer, so it's better to think of it as being in control. Lastly, and one of the most important considerations is the setup and running costs. So naturally, a key advantage of jumping on an existing IoT network is you have no upfront infrastructure costs for your IoT sensors. Also, satellite IoT connectivity is becoming very cost competitive for sensors that don't need to send so much data. So most providers will bundle connectivity costs into their overall offering, so it's not something you need to necessarily worry about. If you're looking to deploy your own on-farm IoT network, there are a range of options to consider. But typically, the enhanced performance comes with an upfront cost for a base station, which brings me to the INCYT base station. The INCYT base station puts you in complete control of your on-farm IoT network coverage with a best-of-breed technology approach that you can be set up in 5 minutes. It's truly plug and play. I hope you found this video helpful. At INCYT, our products make use of all these technologies, and we're just keen to help you navigate this somewhat confusing landscape. Please feel free to reach out to us by clicking the link below to get your free IoT coverage check for your property, and we can help you consider what might work best for you. At INCYT, we've got you covered.